Yes, it is true. You can buy property without listening to one of our videos.
But the reality is you will lose money because of not understanding the basics or fundamentals when it comes to making that purchase.
So we have made life simple for you. In this video, we will be discussing how to actually invest in property.
Location, location, location. I know you've probably heard this countless times before, but let's put a spin to this and really understand what this really means. Where you want to buy, the property is determined by you as the investor. So basically what we mean in this regard is that the type of property that you want to buy will be heavily impacted by the strategy that you choose as the investor. Therefore, it's not a one-size shoe fits all.
So for example, target market. Whenever you look at target market, we need to understand that what type of people are you trying to get into your properties. Now let's take student accommodation for example. If you are planning on going into a student accommodation, we need to understand that what type of properties can be accredited for student accommodations, number one. Number two, we also need to understand that how far should the property be from the tertiary institution for it to still make sense for the students. Let's look at it from a student accommodation perspective. If your property is more than 3 kilometers away from the university, it then makes it less desirable for students because students want to be as close to the university as possible, because sometimes it does happen that they crack these late night studies and they still want to get home. However, if the property is 10 kilometers away, then it's not one that is ideal for students.
Consider if the market is more favorable towards short-term or long-term rentals, because you don't want to find yourself in a situation whereby you are heavily investing in short-term rentals whereas there is no significant demand when it comes to that regard.
It happens a lot where a lot of people want to do short-term lease with their tenants. However, if you're looking at an estate, we need to get permission from that estate. You buying an apartment saying that you're going to be putting it on the platform of Airbnb when the estate doesn't actually allow that, it puts you in a situation that now the property is registered into your name. However, you cannot put it on those platforms. So you need to consider this when you are buying. How you actually can do this is that when you are viewing the property, ask the estate agent and also get it in writing from the body corporate saying that we are allowed to actually do Airbnbs.
Now that we've unfolded location, 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 point number 2 leads us straight to market research. I remember buying a property without doing proper market research. Well, my story is that I bought a house at a very good price according to me at that point in time, but not really understanding that the property was subdivided. Initially the property was 560 meters squared. However, once it was subdivided, my stand size was 260 meters squared. Well, at that point in time, it wasn't much of an issue because I did not know until the time came when I needed to sell, and people were asking me about the average size of land in that area is around about 560, whereas mine unfortunately was 260. So my question is, was it a discount?
Now there are a couple of lessons that we took out from buying that particular property. Now this property was bought when interest rates were really low. We need to understand this. We can never buy a property because interest rates are at their all-time lowest. Or we shouldn't stop to buy properties because interest rates are at their all-time highest. What we need to understand is that how does our strategy work in the current market right now? And whenever you're running your numbers, it should be based on how much average interest rates go. So I'll give you a classic example. Within the past 10 years, interest rates have been fluctuating. However, average was at 11%. Now, if we are saying that interest rates are at 7% and we are basing our investment on the current interest rate at 7%, chances are in the long term, it won't make business sense. So what we're basically saying is that whenever you investing, check interest rate. What has been the average within the past 5 to 10 years? That will give you a clear picture of how much you should actually be running your numbers at.
Top tip learned from this is that we need to consider the space versus the price that we are buying the property at. So you don't want to find yourself in a situation whereby you thought that you bought a property at a discounted rate. However, it's not that it was discounted. The fact of the matter is that the property was subdivided. So ultimately, when it comes to studying the average prices in the area, also get a feeling of the average space of land in an area, so that once you understand that in such an area properties are selling around 560 meters squared, then you know that once your property is at 150 meters squared, definitely that is a red flag.
Now it's for the property buyers. Whenever you are in a market or you're looking at a market that you're trying to buy, make sure that you set notifications on that particular area. Because now what happens is that most of the time people will say that agents are actually working with other investors. However, the most important thing whenever it comes to property investing is that who can actually get to that property first. So whenever properties are actually put on Property 24 or private property, everybody gets alerts that there is a property that's in the market. Now, if you are the last person to see that property, chances are everybody has actually placed offers, and by the time you want to place your offer, the property has been sold. So set notifications whenever you are actually purchasing a property in a specific market.
I'm sure we've all heard this, that you make your money when you buy. But what does this really mean in the context of property investing in 2025?
Now, a good investment is determined by at what price are you buying that particular property. When buying a property at the right price, you are able to position yourself as a property investor to get more gains. I mean, take this for example. If Neo and I are buying properties in the same area, I go for a property that's not so good looking and Neo goes for the best looking property in the area, chances are Neo would be buying the property at market value and I still have that space to actually negotiate. Now, if the average properties in that particular area is at 1 million, Neo is able to purchase the property at 1 million and I'm able to purchase the property at 700,000, it's a no-brainer that the bond will actually be less when I'm buying the property.
Keynote is that we get charged interest based on how much we bought at. So therefore, the higher I'm buying at means the more interest that I'll be paying. Negotiating is your key weapon when it comes to making your money when you buy. Because remember something, that as we did mention, that the less you are able to decrease that price means that the more cash flow that we will be bagging as property investors, because our monthly bond is determined by how much we bought the property for. Therefore, the more you negotiate means the less you pay, and ultimately that means the more we keep from month to month.
And trust me, I know whenever you think about I need to negotiate, you're always thinking that I shouldn't put in a lower price. However, you will never know until you put that offer in. So our stance as property investors is that we make our money when we buy. So whenever we are purchasing a property, we need to do our due diligence in terms of what is the market value of the property. We need to understand that how do we then position ourselves as a property investor in order for us to get the favorable price. Now, once we got those two in check, we are then able to understand that at what price should we actually negotiate the price down to.
Invest Like a Pro with Nongwealth. That was a crash course for beginners to invest like pros. If you want more of this and you'd like to set up a Zoom meeting with us, hit the link below within our descriptions and let's meet on that Zoom.
Invest Like a Pro with Nongwealth.